Hey guys, it is time for the last episode of From the Crow's Mouth of the year 2021. Next week it's right in between that Christmas, New Year's mark, and I don't feel like I'm going to have the time to do an episode, and you're probably going to be celebrating the holidays in some capacity, for those of us who do anyway. So this will be the last one of this year, and it's good because we're going to talk about The Last of Us, the last song on our debut album, Original Sin Part 1. And while we do it, as usual, we're going to sip on something tasty. Today, look at this visual beast. The New York Sour, really old drink. The origins are a little mysterious. People don't know exactly. Some don't even think it's made in New York. But nonetheless, if you order a New York Sour, this is what you're going to get. I'm going to show you how to make it, and then we will talk about The Last of Us and wrap up 2021. The first year, the debut year of Stone Cold Crows, and man, do we got some stuff planned for you guys in 2022. But let's make the drink first, and then we'll get to that. On today's rock and roll bartender segment of From the Crow's Mouth, a video podcast hosted by me, Mitch, singer, songwriter, guitar player for Stone Cold Crows, I'm going to show you how to make a New York Sour. Now, perhaps you've had a whiskey sour before, a Boston sour. It's got a lot of different names, and there's a lot of subtle variations. It's a classic cocktail that's been around since at least the 1800s. In this particular recipe, the inventor of the drink's kind of been lost. There's a lot of different stories saying it was actually invented in Chicago, some Toronto. But what we do know is it's a classic, and it's friggin' delicious. So I'm going to show you how to make it. And what you're going to need is either bourbon or rye whiskey. You can use either or. I prefer it with bourbon, but if you have whiskey, you're already halfway there. You're also going to want lemon juice. As always, freshly squeezed is better, but for convenience, we're going to use the stuff in the bottle. Simple syrup. I'm running pretty low. I'm going to do another batch of that pretty soon. Rocks glass, some ice in a shaker, and the key difference in this sour, red wine. And I'll show you, and it has a pretty cool visual effect to that. So, pretty simple drink, pretty awesome. So let's start. You're going to fill your shaker with ice, as I have done already. You are going to take 2 ounces of your rye or bourbon. In this case, I've got a little bit of Buffalo Trace left. I really like this bourbon, especially in an old fashioned, but pretty good in this too. So we're getting down to the last bit of it, so why not enjoy it, something delicious. So 2 ounces of your favorite bourbon or rye whiskey. You're going to want to use 1 ounce of lemon juice. Into the shaker it goes. And 1 ounce of simple syrup. Now, if you don't really like it as sweet, you could probably dial it down to 3/4 of an ounce or even 1/2 ounce. For the size of the rocks glass I have, I feel like this portion is good enough. Again, all these drinks that I show you guys how to make, these are my takes on them. Some of them follow the recipe exactly, but sometimes I make a slight adjustment just because of my own preferences. As you make them and try them out, you will gain your own understanding of what flavors you like, and you can adjust them accordingly. So we've got 4 ounces in there, to reiterate. 2 ounces of bourbon or rye whiskey, 1 ounce of lemon juice, 1 ounce of simple syrup, and we shake. And we strain into a rocks glass filled with ice. As you can see, that fills up most of the glass, but we want to leave just a little room for the last and final piece de resistance, which makes this cocktail so different from a traditional whiskey sour. It also makes it look pretty nice too. Got that layering spoon from before? You're going to want to use it, or some kind of spoon just to slow the flow. I've actually put a bartender tool there on the top of the wine just to make it easier, but you don't need one. But essentially, you're just going to want to subtly float some red wine on the top. Whatever red wine you got, doesn't matter. You can see this creates a really cool visual effect. And also, you get that red wine taste at the beginning of the drink, and it gets a little more sour as you go on. So that is it. I like to garnish. In this case, I've got a nice black cherry. Looks pretty nice. But there you have it. Your take on a whiskey sour, the New York Sour. Cheers, and we will see you on the music part of the podcast. Alright, so we are back and we have a New York Sour in our hand and we are ready to talk about The Last of Us in the last episode of From the Crow's Mouth in 2021. Man, what a long year it has been. And before we get into this, let's just take a second. Look at how great this is. Like, I don't know what it is about the chemistry and of all, like, the mixology, but when you get a nice perfectly layered drink like that tastes great, man, science is pretty neat, especially when it's the kind that gets you a little buzzed. So without further ado, I'm going to take a quick sip of this before I start talking. Just plop that cherry in there. I'll let it steep. Great stuff. Okay, so The Last of Us. Now, anybody knows, who hasn't been living under a rock, at least in the video game world, has heard of The Last of Us, the video game franchise. So popular, actually, that HBO has picked up the show to do a series about it. And HBO doesn't mess around, so chances are this is going to be a pretty big deal. And the culture behind this video game franchise is already huge. They even have their own day that the fans of the game celebrate annually. Outbreak Day, or which they changed to The Last of Us Day once the COVID virus struck because it hit a little too many nerves, I guess, given the nature of the actual COVID virus. But September 26th in the game's lore is the day that the virus, in the game's context, spreads and changes the world forever. And we actually released this song on that day for that reason. A friend of mine was telling me a little bit about this back culture. He's a much bigger gamer than I am, but we were talking about it while I was bartending one night, and I told him when we were planning on releasing the album, which was October 1st, and he's like, man, how do you not release The Last of Us on Outbreak Day? So we did, kind of a little homage to the game and the culture and community itself. And of course, that was a primary inspiration for the song. It's not really a secret that I titled the song that way. There was a little bit more going on, and we can talk about that. But essentially, yes, it is a bit of an homage to everything that The Last of Us represents. And at the time, and this is going back to the first Last of Us video game, because this song is a song that, like Ghost in a Bottle, was written for the Ghostlight Tragedy project Bryson and I never actually created to see the light of day. So this song's 7-8 years old. But I wrote it after a particular period where I was watching a lot of post-apocalyptic kind of stuff. I just watched The Book of Eli. I just watched The Road with Viggo Mortensen, based on the novel of the same name. And, of course, The Walking Dead. And it's like there's a lot of post-apocalyptic stuff going on. And what interested me so much about those scenarios was how people behaved in those scenarios. The morality of human nature, when put up against a wall, became very interesting. Like, people do some pretty bad stuff to each other in situations where hope seems already lost. And that concept that, okay, how far do you go to stay alive? Kind of like, you hear stories of people who are at sea or a plane crash or something and there's no food and maybe they resort to cannibalism, and it's like, what mindset do you have to be in to make that dark choice? And it brings up a lot of questions of good and evil and all that stuff. And so that really interested me, and that is actually what interested me so much about the Last of Us video game series. Brilliant video games aside. I'm not really much of a gamer anymore, but I've enjoyed those ones thoroughly. The gameplay was great, but it is the character development and the story that emotionally just pulls you in to that dark world and shows you moments of human beauty, but also moments of human ugliness, all wrapped up in the same, and sometimes from the same people. And so that is particularly interesting to me, and that is what inspired the song. And lyrically, you will get into that stuff. I mean, if you listen to the song, the chorus, it's all a question. Every single line in the chorus is a question, and it was meant to be a question because each of us kind of have to answer that question for ourselves. And it's very much like that old Mike Tyson saying, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Everyone can say what they would do in the zombie apocalypse, or what they would do in this situation, or what they would do in that situation. But when it actually happens, chances are that's not actually what you're going to end up doing. And so lyrically, this was a really fun song to tackle because it just was me thinking about the darkness and the dark side of humanity. That's obviously a theme that's been held through Stone Cold Crow's music, and this one was perfect to just align with that world in that video game franchise. Speaking of that, there's a few parts in that song lyrically that you might not pick up on if you were just listening to the song, because it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. There is a line that is just another scar to bear. It is the end of a sequence in a vocal bridge, but the spelling of the word bear changes upon repetition. So B-A-R-E versus B-E-A-R. Both apply to the same sentence appropriately in the context, and it was some of those little double-edged twists that if you sit down and read the lyrics versus listen to the song and really think about them, I think you'll have a few questions that you might even ask yourself, and maybe about yourself or about humanity and some of the ways that we actually have behaved, not in a fictional context but in real life. There was also a line in there about, are you trying to stop from crashing, or are you speeding up the plane? I kind of lifted that idea from an Ed Guy song, Lavatory Love Machine, where there's this sequence in this just German pilot is talking about the plane's going down, and it's like, well, there's not really a hell of a lot we can do, so we're just going to fly faster. And I thought that was kind of funny, but then, of course, in the context of, which part are you on? Are you trying to help humanity get back to, a salvageable space, or are you one of these people out there that's just kind of driving it into the ground faster? So that's probably all I need to talk about the lyrics. But musically, there was a lot of stuff we did with this song that was interesting as well. A lot of guitar harmonies, the Iron Maiden influence is front and center. There's no hiding that. I mean, hell, they say you wear your influences on your sleeves. Well, I literally have an entire sleeve devoted to Eddie and Iron Maiden, and this is proof of it, at least for me as a songwriter. A lot of guitar solos, a lot of all that stuff. But the introduction to the song on the acoustic guitar was actually pretty much dumbed down. They had a whole lot more going on, and we stripped it right back to just an acoustic guitar and some nice strings, because if you listen to the soundtrack in the video games The Last of Us by Gustavo, and I'm not going to even try to pronounce his last name because I've already tried it once and failed horribly, but he did a lot of acoustic guitar, and that was mostly the soundtrack. And if you ever played the games, the acoustic guitar holds real significance actually in the story as well, for an emotional tug at the old heartstrings. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it just made sense to put that acoustic intro into the song. And then, of course, it gets pretty much like a heavy metal banger for the rest of it. The other things that we did musically, there's a few weird drum parts in that big instrumental section, particularly is how the drums switch up. And I remember when I showed Bryson the demo, and he's like, man, how the hell did you come up with that? I would have never put that drum beat there. They say it is true. Working with limitations forces you to get creative sometimes. And using my Boss recorder, that 8-track recorder that barely works that I was telling you about, it has a built-in drum machine, and I'm not great at writing drum parts. I've been getting better, but this was also 8 years ago, and so I would just scroll through the list of pre-programmed drums and find something I could work with. In that case, I think it was like a disco or a hip-hop beat or something that just sort of fit the bill, and I used it and I played along with it. And so it's very out of left field, but in the context of the song, it really works. And this was the song that it just kind of came to be. Like, I wasn't even planning on using it for this project, but when Adam heard the demo, he really wanted to do it. There's some really strong, like I said, lyrical parts there. Instrumentally, if you're a guitar player, if you're a guitar fan, it's probably going to be the most impressive track for that kind of stuff. And just the song The Last of Us, it's the last song on the album. It was our, like, here's what you're going to get out of Stone Cold Crows. You know, if you've listened to the album, you made it this far, it's like we're going out with a bang, but like, we are an album band. You know, you might like one song here and there, but if you listen to the album front to finish, that is the statement. That is how we want to close it off, with a big, strong song, epic of all proportions, and of course, maybe a few questions to ask yourself if you sit and reflect on the lyrics. Dark questions, as usual, but that's it. So realistically, I don't think I can talk anymore about The Last of Us. I mean, I probably could, especially if we start talking about moments from the game series and stuff like that. But I'll let you listen to the song again, maybe make up your own conclusions, because that's half the fun of any artistic piece anyway, is getting out of it what you personally get out of it versus the creator. So that's it. That's it for 2021. It has been a great year since the debut of our first song, Before the Devil Knows We're Dead, to the release of our first album, October 1st. It's been out a couple of months now, and we just came back from the studio, like I said, a couple of weeks ago. We are ready to hit the ground running in 2022. Won't see you next week, so happy holidays to everybody out there, and back in January, and we will be fresh and ready to go with some new stuff to talk about and some new things perhaps to show you as well. So without further ado, guys, as usual, dare to be different, create cool shit, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.